Alright, so today we are doing nature of pollution. So what is it? It's contamination of the air, water, or soil by substances that are harmful to living organisms. It can occur through anything in nature, like a volcanic eruption, or something unnatural, something that we have caused, spilling of oil, and disposal of industrial waste. We have two different versions, point source and non-point source. So point source literally is that we can trace it to a single origin. You can find its point, where it came from. And so that part, if it's a point source, it is localized, so it's easier to manage the impact and to clean it up. But it can be challenging because there's more of them. So it's not just one single thing. There's a bunch of smaller point source areas of pollution. Your non-point source cannot be traced back to a single origin. So, something like stormwater runoff, there's a lot of areas where it's coming from. It's not one single source. The runoff across every parking lot is coming together and making that pollution. So again, more difficult to manage, and you can't assign the responsibility to anybody. So when you kind of look around, you have to decide, is it point source or non-point source? This stack is a point source, in a way. But then, air quality, it's contributing to it. Versus all the runoff, it's non-point source. Alright, so we get pollutions from our fossil fuels. The release of the greenhouse gases can contribute to respiratory problems and to acid rain. Through domestic waste, our food waste, our sewage, any of our garbage, even just, you go out and hike in the woods, state parks, hiking trails, wherever, you will find waste because people just throw their garbage everywhere. So if you can, leave it better than you found it. Pick stuff up. We also have industrial waste, so heavy metals or heats being released into the air and the water, acids, and agricultural waste. Fertilizers, animal waste, and pesticides contaminate your water source. When people are spreading manure, it's still actually creating contaminants to the water source. Alright, so your non-point source pollution, everything in the area that runs off to this water basin is actually contributing, so it's a non-point source of pollution in this river. Again, we can see our sources of pollution through the combustion of fossil fuels, domestic waste, industrial waste, and through agriculture. In the area of fossil fuels are petroleum, natural gas, and coal, and currently 90% of our energy is coming from fossil fuels. They expect oil production to peak between 2020 and 2030. Obviously, this particular bit of information was put together a few years ago, but we're in that area. The consumption of energy currently is increasing. However, with how everything has been with COVID lately, we are seeing the effects of actually slowing down and stepping back. We're seeing that turnaround. But this stuff is still valid. The projected world oil production will be exhausted by 2100. Alright, so they anticipate that there will be no oil left to produce anything through oil by the year 2100. Fossil fuels produce significant and diverse pollution problems, including greenhouse gases, gaseous sulfur, nitrogen oxides, and land-based disturbances. So crude oil is a liquid mixture of thousands of organic chemicals found underground. It's the type of thing that John D. Rockefeller would use. So they would take the crude oil there at Standard Oil, his company, and refine it to create the oil that then got produced. Crude oil is a result of decaying organic matter over thousands of years, so it gets called fossil fuel. That's why it's called fossil fuel, because it's full of decaying organic matter. It is found all over the world and varies tremendously in its density and the amount of sulfur and the amount of metals that are contained within it. So there's difference. These are just some pictures. The oil refinery and the BP oil rig. You guys may remember hearing about the BP oil spill in the Gulf. These things are really dangerous, but basically the idea is they take the crude oil and it goes through a distillation process. So depending on what they do, there's vacuum distillation, and then they have cracking or residue conversion, and then it all comes down here. Depending on your process with it, is going to depend on the quality of your output and what it gets used for. From these options, it could come up here to become like gasoline, and you have your very different kinds that help us get around. If they take it for gas treating, then it's up here for chemical feedstock. So it depends what they're doing with the crude oil, what the output will be, and how it gets used. So as far as how much oil, like if you take all of the world's oil and you break it up into percentages of like where they are housed, who has the most reserves just naturally underground, the Middle East has the bulk of it, and then in North America, followed by Africa, Central and South America, Eurasia, Asia and the ocean, and Europe. And again, it's just from naturally occurring pockets underground. So coal provides about 25% of our commercial energy, 22%. For the world is 25%, but just for the United States is 22%. So it is our most abundant fossil fuel, and it is also very cheap. However, it's really dangerous to mine. It harms the lands and the water and the air, and burning it causes smog, acid rain, and global warming. And again, this is how, if you break it down across the world, the oil reserves look. So we have 116 billion tons of coal reserves estimated in North America, followed by Eastern Europe at 113 billion tons, and then other areas of Asia, China, Middle East, Australia, Western Europe, and South and Central America. And coal also is just, it's organic material that's been under pressure. So again, it's just how they occurred naturally. The health impacts for use of coal is that 131 million Americans live in areas with smog pollution. Over 45,000 lives are cut short by the air pollution due to the diseases that you get from the pollutants that are in the air. It's estimated that about 60,000 children are born at significantly increased risk of neurological defects due to mothers eating mercury-contaminated fish. That's part of the waste that's going into the water, and then it gets into the fish and we eat it. And that's why, like, even just something as simple as having tuna, you really shouldn't do that more than like once in a week because of the contamination of mercury in the fish. So we have here kind of like that cycle of it. It goes from the incinerator up into the air, and it kind of gets rained down, and it's into the water. So it's getting into the fish. It can evaporate back up, but it also, like, we eat the fish, and it's just this whole cycle. Alright, so oil spills. We have about 31,000 gallons of spilled oil getting into our waterways every day. Between 1973 and 1993, we had about 200,000 oil spills in the United States. And in that process, they spilled over 230 million gallons of oil. We're seeing a lot of land destruction, right? This is mountaintop removal in West Virginia because they're looking for coal. There's a lot of coal beds here, so as they keep going and digging through, they're basically removing mountaintops in the process of trying to get coal. Alright, and then global warming. Again, only 4% of the world population produces 25% of the carbon dioxide pollution. It's projected that the Earth's surface temperature is going to increase between 2.5 and 10.4 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100. And that's if no major efforts are taken to reduce the carbon emissions. So we're seeing the effects of slowing down, and so we know that we can do better. So it's just a matter of fighting to keep things clean. So from here, that's kind of it for what you're doing for this week. My suggestion would be to check out An Inconvenient Truth if you can find it. They put onto Hulu An Inconvenient Sequel, which is obviously the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth, so it's also the more recent one. If you get some time, you really should check them out. It's quite interesting, and it's all on this topic with the global warming and the pollution. That's it. Let me know if you have questions or need any help.